Hello, everybody, and welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around YouTube live streaming, James, because we get millions and millions and millions and millions of viewers. My name's Suj.
My name is James, and I'm leaving Planet FPL to start my own YouTube career after the amount of views the Champ Man stream got last
night. Oh, dear, it's funny. It's a story for another day.
It is.
But if you are a Twitter follower and a YouTube regular follower, you'll know what we're talking about. Today is Throwback Thursday, James, and today you have chosen a player that everyone will know. I think if you're talking about iconic footballers that everybody knows or has a memory of, this is one of them. Put it this way, my mum doesn't know anything about football. Anything about football. You ask who Paul Gascoigne is, she'll tell you.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe anybody, over the age of 10 would not know the name and what he personifies, if you will. I guess for me, as a personal and a selfish, it was basically my first footballing god, if you will. My first season at Spurs was 1990-91. Gascoigne comes straight back from the World Cup, right? I mean, it really was in peak of Gazza mania. I guess my first icon probably was Lineker, because at 6 years old, everyone just wanted to be the guy who scored the goals, right? But, I mean, that team was just completely dependent on what Gascoigne did or didn't do. And obviously, Gascoigne missed major chunks of not just his Spurs career, but also his Lazio and even bits of his Rangers and his Middlesbrough career through injuries and outside things off the pitch as well. But when Gascoigne played well for Spurs, Spurs were a very good side. And when Gascoigne didn't play, Spurs were very average. And that was essentially what it was.
To be honest with you, James, that Lineker Gazza team for the first season or two, and I'm going to say it very quietly, but some regular listeners will already know this, I supported Spurs then.
Did you?
A little bit. Not really.
Oh,
Do you remember the story? No.
You must have told me when I was drunk, but I'm going to bully you for that now.
No. So what happened when I was born in 80, so I was 8 years old. I had two older cousins who were both a couple of years older than me. One was a Liverpool fan and one was a Spurs fan. And they both used to just beat me up and say, you're supporting Liverpool. And one would beat me up and say, you're supporting Spurs. And then the other one would come in and say, you're supporting Liverpool. So I didn't know any better. But the one who was a Spurs fan used to beat me up more than the other one. So until the 1990 Cup semi-final, when I found West Ham, and then I was like, you know what, screw you both. I'm going to forage my own path. So as an 8-year-old, I watched a bit more. I remember Gazza and Lineker.
Very interesting that you mentioned the West Ham 1991 semi-final,
which you lost 4-0.
Which you lost 4-0 to Nottingham Forest at Villa Park, because 3 hours.
You went on to the final.
3 hours earlier at Wembley, Gascoigne had scored that free kick against Arsenal, which
it was
so iconic.
That commentary of that game, even though we lost 4-0, was they used to talk, and we still talk about the West Ham way of passing football. And it was that I thought, you know what, underdogs who gallantly lose, that'll do it for me, because as a 9 or 10-year-old, you don't know
underdogs who gallantly get battered.
It was fine. I'd rather that and forage my own path than be bullied by the other two. But going back to what we're talking about, that's where maybe his rise really started.
The rise started at Newcastle. To give you a little bit, this is not intended as a Paul Gascoigne story. This is what he did in his career, because I think most people already know that. What people might not know is that he was rejected by a couple of clubs as a schoolboy. Ipswich Town was definitely one. And he had major troubles as a child before breaking into the Newcastle first team. He was essentially getting therapy treatment as young as 10 years old, because he'd seen, I think it was his brother's friend died in an accident, and he saw it.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's not forgiven for some of the bad things that he did later in his career, but he was obviously incredibly troubled from a very young age. And if you go and research old stories of when he was playing for the Newcastle youth team and that, they didn't think that he would make it, because he was, let's be honest, he liked his food before he found the drink and the other stuff. He was overweight.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't train like other people. He wasn't committed in that way. But he
No.
had the talent, and it was just a case of whether the talent would outweigh all the other stuff that came with it. I suspect that if Gascoigne rocked up at a top flight football club now, he wouldn't make it.
No, I would agree with
Genuinely.
you. Mm.
And like once he got in, he's obviously, in terms of a footballer, he's good enough. I just think clubs wouldn't have put up with it in the first place.
Too much baggage that comes with it, right? You look at so many good players now that have had a baggage that comes with it. Maybe Ravel Morrison or some of these kind of guys. They definitely had the talent, but didn't. They were never going to make it. What would you? So Gazza was an attacking midfielder.
Yes.
But he wasn't a number 10 in a playmaker style. More pick up the ball, drive, dribble, and make things happen through all action rather than eye of a needle type passing and that kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of think Moussa Dembele, but put 20 goals a season on it. That's what I'm talking to you about. His greatest uniqueness, I always remember when I look back on him, was and watching some goals again earlier today before we recorded. Particularly actually some of the goals he scored for Rangers when he went up to Scotland, was he had this incredible ability to run at people, and people couldn't get near him because he didn't have the skill of, say, like a modern player that we see in the Premier League, like saying Eden Hazard could just tear you apart. But what Gascoigne had was incredible physicality to go with his directness. So where he was unique was he was a little bit overweight for most of his career, but he was still quick. And he had power.
Yeah.
But when people used
short, right?
Yeah, but I tell you what, he was very good in the air considering his height. I mean, it was 5'11" or something, I think.
No,
yeah,
5'9".
5'9". But he was good in the air. He's got a number of headed goals for all of his clubs, and a couple for England, actually. One very good one in Turkey. We spoke about that Graham Taylor podcast we did a few weeks back. But he had this incredible ability when running with the ball to hold people off. People couldn't get it. He used to do the arm off all the time. Get off. While he was running with the ball. Incredible.
I'm going to say it, and I'm going to take it back straight away. But Messi-esque, right? Low centre of gravity and stocky.
A little bit.
Messi's got the skill that you're talking about, like a Hazard. So
Gascoigne had brilliant skill, but you wouldn't put Gascoigne's skill in terms of how he would beat a player one-on-one in terms of step overs and stuff in the way a Messi would. Obviously, we're talking something that was born in a different planet. But Gascoigne, yes, could mug you off with skill, etc. He was very good at the Cruyff turn, loved that. But it was the physicality when he ran at you that he was like a ball coming at you. And obviously, if someone comes at you that strong, you're trying to get in from the side and tackle, and you choose to help people off. And the reason I use the Dembele analogy a little bit, and they're not particularly comparable players, but if you think about, and again, it's kind of from a Spurs perspective, the way Dembele could carry the ball for Spurs for 30, 40 yards or so, and get Spurs into the opposition half, and then give it to the people who had the bit more technical quality and skill. Throw in the fact that Gascoigne used to do that, get to the edge of the box and score. I'll keep going into the penalty box. Whereas Dembele always felt like he was a handbrake on. Gascoigne, some of the goals he scored are ridiculous stuff. I mean, obviously talking about the free kick he scored against Arsenal, but I remember one of the first games I went to, Peter Shilton was in goal for Derby. And yeah, Gascoigne was very much a central midfielder who had license to, let's say, not track back as much as others. But he wasn't through negligence. Like, he did it, but you wanted him at the other end of the pitch, right? And in those days, you didn't really have number 10s as such. Most teams would have commonly two centre forwards, a standard 4-4-2. So you could leave him to go forward. But I remember this game against Derby, must have been 4th or 5th game in the season, and he got a hat-trick. 2 of them free kicks. The first free kick he scored, like, Shilton ended up dead in the side netting. Remember the old nets used to have the stanchion that held him up?
Yeah.
Well, I'm telling you, Shilton nearly broke the net trying to get to this Gascoigne free kick. He couldn't get near it. And then a few minutes later, Gascoigne puts it in the other top corner from even further out. And Shilton just watches it go this time. And we're talking about England's goalkeeper previously with Gascoigne at Italia 90. He had incredible technique from that perspective. And obviously people remember the individual goals, none more so than obviously the Scotland goal.
Yep, flick and finish.
Which even if you think about, say, the Arsenal free kick goal and the Scotland Wembley goal, they both came at a time when he was under mass media scrutiny. So go back to his time at Spurs where he was having terrible injuries. He actually played, before the semi-final against Arsenal, he played an hour against Norwich because he'd just come back from a hernia operation. And he wasn't fit. He played an hour at Wembley as well and went off. He won us the game and got off the pitch. And obviously killed himself being too hyper for the final. And before the Scotland game, he was obviously under huge pressure in the media because his powers had waned somewhat from the Italia 90 Gazza. I think that's fair to say. He hadn't played very well against Switzerland and been substituted during the game. And obviously, this is straight after all the dentist chair stuff and all that.
Yep.
So the media are right on his backs, and the majority of them, let's say, targeted abuse. Let's say, I know the undercurrent of what's targeted at, say, Raheem Sterling, for example, now is very different to what Gascoigne got, but it was always Gascoigne. Listen to interviews that Gascoigne says, and they're like talking about that dentist chair night. It's like, yeah, it was all of us. We were all idiots. We went out, we got pissed, shit happened. But it was always about me in the media. I was the target. Yep. And he knew that and had to deal with it. And he answered people in the best way possible. Ali McCoy tells a great story about in the build-up to obviously that England-Scotland game, Gascoigne was at Rangers. And in the lead-up, so they knew the draw for like 6 months. Every day at training, Gascoigne's giving it the big and what England's going to do to him, saying Scotland aren't even a country, this, that and the other, even though he's playing there and taking money off one of their biggest clubs. Right? Brilliant stuff. There's a documentary around me. You can see the training videos where he says to a few of the Rangers players, you're not even a country. And then apparently they were all shitting themselves, obviously, when they came back for pre-season after Gascoigne had done that to them. And McCoy reckons Gascoigne never mentioned it. And he thinks the reason that Gascoigne never brought it up was because it was so good. Whereas if Gascoigne had scored a shit tapping from 2 yards, he'd have been giving it the big one up yours.
You don't, when you've done something that good, you don't need to, right? Everyone just knows.
Yeah, it was such genius that they were all waiting for him, as you can expect, because he was such the character, to come in and give it the big one. And he just never said nothing about it. Wow. He let them wait on it, and he never brought it up. I think he was a bit embarrassed about how good he was, or how good that goal was. As an individual, if you look back to many of the older stories, and I think that's why players, people like Gary Mabbott, Gary Lineker, some of his people he knew at Newcastle, very much have tried to rally around him in darker times, is because he was always such a generous person. There are numerous stories and accounts that people have given in terms of Gascoigne's generosity, in terms of giving money away, etc., that he didn't need. I mean, most of it he gave away in the bars, don't get me wrong, but he was very generous. That said, obviously, when the drink got involved, there was a very dark Paul Gascoigne who did things that are unforgivable as well. And to balance this story, that has to get mentioned.
Yeah, and I think we'll touch on that in just a sec. Looking at his playing career, I mean, he scored best part of 100-odd goals. He played 450-odd games. Some decent clubs: Spurs, Lazio, Rangers, Newcastle.
Are you looking at stats in front of you, Suj?
I've got some.
Can you read out the most embarrassing one, which is his total number of England caps?
57. So, do you think he fulfilled his potential? Is my question to you.
No, I mean,
you think he should have done more?
The modern day comparison to bring one up is, and this is difficult because you could say that he did, is Rooney, and the reason I guess it's influenced by me. Like I said, I saw Rooney as a 15-year-old play at Tottenham for Everton's kids, and was like, oh my god. And then watching him in Euro 2004. I'm fully believing at that point that he was going to go on and become the best player in the world.
Yep.
And that's why I use that comparison, because after Italia 90, that's what Gascoigne should have gone on and become. And essentially, because of injuries, personal demons, it didn't happen. And obviously all the off-the-field stuff, of course. But yet that England caps is a disgraceful number. I mean, if I said to you, right, pick a best ever England team, would you pick like a Paul Gascoigne or a Frank Lampard, for example? And it's not particularly to belittle Frank Lampard, because Frank Lampard is completely, and I've digged him out before, but Frank Lampard He's a perfect case of what you can be as a footballer if you are driven and put all the effort in, right?
100%.
Whereas, you know, if Gascoigne had Lampard's temperament, for example, Gascoigne could have fulfilled all that potential, right? If Lampard had all the outside stuff that Gascoigne had, then you wouldn't have heard of Frank Lampard beyond 20. That's what I'm saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Gazza is the type of player that brings a smile to your face when you think about him, whereas Frank Lampard is a functional, incredible machine. But Gazza gets people off their seats. I don't think Frank's the type of player that gets people off their seats, which is why most people would probably, you're right, pick Paul Gascoigne over a Lampard and maybe even to a certain degree a Gerrard or what have you. Scholes a little bit different, but in the comparison that you used, without a doubt, I would say so. He did have a dark side as well. And this is not him he did bad things. I think he was ill, right? I think we have to say that it wasn't stupidity, it was an illness. Or let's say it is an illness because, you know.
So I got a list of things that Gascoigne's been treated for, actually.
Okay.
So he's been treated for throughout his career, bulimia, which, considering the guy used to like to eat so much, might come across surprising. But then if you look at the kind of the more haunted Paul Gascoigne that you might have seen in the press in the last 10 years, who looks very thin, perhaps that shouldn't be too surprising. OCD, obviously, bipolar, alcoholism. Obviously, he's addictive personality. He's been treated to try and get help for that. Cocaine, smoking, gambling, high energy drinks, food. He's been treated to try, and there's some of them, you know, like food and stuff. But he was, you know, Paul Gascoigne ate what he wanted when he wanted and could get away with it because he was so good. He once told a story very late in his career when he had a brief spell at Everton before he went off to play in China for a little bit. He's saying the thing he loved most at Everton was if he was a sub, he used to get loads of toffees, and he used to wear like loads of coats and get all the toffees. He said this one game he knew that he wasn't going to come on, so he went mad and ate like 50 of these toffees. Like 5 minutes to go, he's sitting there with like a stitch. He's in pain. I've eaten too much, and the boss is like, "Get ready, Gazza, you're coming on." And he's like,
"Oh dear!"
And this is in the Premier League, like this century, right?
2002.
I mean, you could lose hours on YouTube, genuinely, just looking at stories that people tell of him. The best one I'd heard was the one Ali McCoist told on Goals on Sunday a few years ago about when they were at Rangers. Gazza said to Ali McCoist, because they were great mates. I mean, actually, just before I tell that story, one story about Gazza, which is funny as well, is Ali McCoist thought someone had broke into his house one morning at 3 o'clock in the morning, went downstairs ready to go and kill the burglar, and Gascoigne's in his kitchen, pissed out of his head, making a sandwich. He just broke into his house and decided to make a sandwich in McCoist's house. It's like, you know, you never knew what you were going to get. But this one story, Gascoigne had said to McCoist, "Look, let me wind up one of the players. Who's pissing you off?" This is Gordon Jury, who ironically joined Spurs after Gascoigne had broke his leg and that. Never played together at Spurs, but would have had a crossover. So anyway, Gascoigne's got this big arse trout, a couple of them. It's like to McCoist, "What do you want to do?" And McCoist said, "I don't know." Gascoigne said, "Come on, nick his car keys," right? So they go and nick his car keys from the changing room.
Locker or whatever,
Yeah. And they hide this massive trout in the car, in a really hidden place. So Jury, for days, he's like, "I can't, there's a problem, man. My car smells like shit. What's going on?" And after about 3 days, he finds this fish. Brilliant. So he's like, "Oh, great, got rid of the smell." Anyway, a week later, Jury's still like, "I can't get rid of this smell. You've killed my car." What he doesn't know is there's still another fish in the car somewhere else. He thinks, and Gascoigne said this to McCoist at the time. He said he'll find this one, but he won't find the other one.
Because that's it, right? You find one, you think,
he thinks that's it. He's solved the problem, but he's still going around with this other fish for weeks in his car.
Oh, fantastic!
And that's the prankster that was in him, and I think the kind of off the part bit of Gazza that we love to to hear about from is some of the stories. You can tell that when he's done like a few speaking with audiences and stuff like that, and he's like he thinks he's a comedian. Like he enjoys the attention.
Life.
I think that's one of the things that really, in terms of to relate back to the media attention, I think unlike a lot of modern players, I think at first he loved it. And I think even when they were hounding him for stuff and he used to say, you know, I just want to go away to a hotel, do a bit of fishing and get away with it, I still think quite secretly he enjoyed looking in the paper the next morning to see if his paper was there. His name was in the paper, because I think he did like the attention.
The reality is, James, that there's a lot of people that are very similar, that think they don't like it. And once you get a taste for a little bit of limelight and you get in the papers, that in itself is an endorphin hit and an addictive behavior. I've got a few friends who I know were wanting to build social media profiles about various different things. And even before, we're like, you know what, actually, I want to keep myself to myself. You get a little taste for it. You get a few endorphin hits from a like on a post or something, and you want more. And I think the newspaper stuff feeds into that addictive personality. I just feel like Gaz is one of those people that has so many stories. Like if you were going to go and get deserted on get stranded on a desert island with only 3 football people, Gazza would be one of them.
Oh, I'm not sure about that. I think he'd drive you around the bend after a bit, mate.
I'd take Harry Redknapp as well, because he's got a story or two to tell as well. I think, yeah. And then you take Gordon Ramsay because he can cook.
Gazza would need feeding for sure. I think, I mean, to say into that, into the attention, he had a brief spell at Boston United. I think when Gascoigne got told about Boston, he thought it was a team in the MLS. Rocks up there in the National League or whatever they were in at the time. And I think he fell out with them because they denied him permission to go on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. And he fell out with them. Then he had a brief spell people might not know about as manager at Kettering Town, which went abysmally wrong because basically he turned up pissed every day as the football manager. Yeah, for every good, there's always a but with Gascoigne. And then when you talk about the bad, I mean, for me as a Spurs fan, and obviously loved him as a child, I only want to come back to the good and remember him for the footballer. You know, when Hoddle left him out in 1998, like it was a national outcry in terms of how could you leave him out? But the guy wasn't fit. Wasn't fit. The alarm bells should have rung straight away when he left Rangers and went to Middlesbrough, the Middlesbrough team that we spoke about last week, who had got relegated. Obviously, as I said, he made his first appearance in that League Cup final against Chelsea. Middlesbrough, a Division 1 side. Now, they did come back up, so he was back playing in the Premier League the following year. But it wasn't the best build-up to go and beat England's number 8 at the World Cup. No. And, you know, with the emergence of Paul Scholes on that, in hindsight, looking back on it, I can see why he was left out, because he didn't have the stamina really to do much more than an hour anymore. And for Gascoigne, once he'd lost that yard to go with the physicality and obviously the technical quality, you know, you could put a pass on a sixpence any way you liked, right foot or left foot, not bothered. Then he obviously wasn't the same player. And I found it when he came back a couple of times with Middlesbrough and Everton, he always got an incredible reception at Spurs. But it was also a little bit sad to watch him in that sort of decline as well, knowing that he's, you know, he was still only like 31, 32, but was nowhere near the player that we'd seen in 1990 with in Italia 90. And Gascoigne did so much for English football at that time that I think if England hadn't had that Italia 90 with Gascoigne obviously central to England's performance, then I'm not sure that the Premier League and the rise in attendances in English football would have happened in the years that followed. Because it brought a bit of boom back to English football. Yeah,
there was a bit of glamour and razzmatazz associated to it. I definitely agree with you on that. What do you think about, obviously, the wife-beating situation and what have you? Because you say that it's interesting, you talk about how he's always welcome back with positivity and that tinge of sadness. And we've spoken about the alcoholism and all of that kind of stuff. I personally still look at it as unacceptable, but driven by an illness again, as opposed to him being an idiot or what have you. And I'm not sure how Cheryl feels about it.
Well, they've obviously still got some form of a relationship because obviously they shared a child together, right? And obviously Gascoigne was step parent, I think, for Cheryl's 2 other children. I think the major mistake that really blighted his career from that personal level perspective was when he left Lazio and he went to Rangers, because Cheryl was in Hertfordshire, which is obviously, as we all know, is near Spurs, essentially. Spurs didn't express an interest to sign him back. There were a number of other English clubs that did try and sign Gascoigne when he came back from Lazio. Leeds, Aston Villa and Chelsea were the main 3 that were definitely mentioned. And he definitely would have been better off coming back to Villa or Chelsea. I know that he didn't want to go to Chelsea because of the links to Spurs and the rivalry, although it would have been fine. You know, Hoddle played for Chelsea after 15 odd years at Spurs. Wasn't a big deal. It would have been fine. Even if he'd gone to Villa, he would have been a lot bloody closer to Hertfordshire than Glasgow. He missed the birth of the kid because essentially they had a 3-day bonding trip, Rangers, and they went down south and Gascoigne promised to do just the one night and then obviously go for the birth. But he shouldn't have even been doing the one night, right? I don't know if she gave birth that night or he was in such a state that he carried on drinking, which either could be true. I'm not sure. But he didn't have his priorities in the right place. He needed, that's why I talk about the media attention. He needed attention. He needed people to constantly feed his thirst. He couldn't do the whole loneliness thing. You've read the story about the night before we played Germany in 1990?
No.
So 1990, you know, it's like, Gazza, seriously, please get an early night's sleep tonight. For God's sakes, World Cup semi-final tomorrow. Yeah, sure, boss. So Bobby Robson, obviously, his manager. And he loved Bobby Robson as well. Everton talked about Bobby Robson and Terry Venables. He loved them both. So anyway, it's like 11 o'clock at night and someone's playing tennis. It's fucking Gascoigne, obviously, isn't it? He's playing tennis with these 2 Italians who don't even know who he is. He's working on a sweat and where. Who comes down? Robson. He's like, what are you doing? Gazza's like, shit. He runs past Robson. He's rooming with Chris Waddle. Hides in Chris Waddle's room. And Bobby Robson's like, let me at him. This is the night before the Germany game in 1990. He's been playing tennis. And Waddle's like, stupid, you've been playing tennis. So he looks at Gascoigne and Gascoigne's like, yeah. Waddle's like, let him in. so Robson starts going mental at Gascoigne. He's like, what's wrong with you? Starts going mental, yada, yada, yada. He's like, you're playing against the best midfielder in the world tomorrow in Lothar Matthäus. And Gascoigne goes, what are you talking about, boss? I'm the best midfielder in the world. And that's, you know, he didn't, but even that, like, he couldn't sit still. You ever hear him talk about before the semi-finals and the finals for Spurs in 91? Was similar stories where he was just doing ridiculous things the night before. I think before the semi-final against Arsenal, I think they had to give him injections to calm him down.
Wow.
Because it was so hyper. You can see, I mean, his interview after the game, in hindsight, he could well have been on something to get him through that, bearing in mind he'd just come through the hernia operation as well. I wouldn't have been hugely surprised if that come out. Brilliant interview he gives in the tunnel at Wembley after the game. Where he says, I'm away to get my suit measured in that famous Geordie accent. And then obviously for the final against Forest as well, he could have been sent off 3 times in the first 15 minutes before he ended up getting himself stretchered off because he was just so hyper for it. Sometimes it worked for the best and others it didn't.
Yeah, I think maybe it's an interesting question to wrap up with. I don't know if we're wrapping up here. Has there ever been anyone quite like Gazza, any other English footballer in modern times quite like Gazza, in terms of the whole package that comes with him, the media hype, the razzmatazz, the drama, and then the talent as well? No. In my opinion. It's hard to think of one. There's plenty that have a bit of it, but nobody that was just
the older ones would. And I'm not necessarily saying in terms of technical ability. because George Best was actually probably a better player than Paul Gascoigne. But for the
Agreed.
older listeners,
Agreed.
that's actually probably more of a comparison in terms of the way their lifestyle played out. Then George Best was just someone who just went out on the piss, and he was addicted to women, really, right?
Yeah.
Gascoigne had many different demons and addictions that he couldn't deal with, from eating and, high energy drinks to, his OCDs.
Ultimately, booze was a real problem, right? That was the one that really probably underpinned.
I think so. The
of
booze, and then there was obviously, I mentioned cocaine earlier. We're not talking Maradona levels here in terms of the abuse, but he certainly had taken it on a number of occasions as well. And I think he was easily led. The thing is as well, what didn't help was when he tried to come off the drink, if he went out somewhere socially, say it was a hotel or something, obviously the people remember him fondly. All they want to do straight away is buy him a drink.
Yeah.
And that was a never. So you never get away when you've got this guy who, admittedly by his own account, felt it. Nice picture, Suj. Felt it necessary. I just remembered
I had it as my background. He was there, so
felt it necessary to have to be around people, even if he didn't know them.
Yeah.
He just didn't. He feared being on his own. You can tell that in his interviews and stuff.
There we go. I think everybody will have Gazza memories, and I think everybody will have Gazza stories. So, jump on Twitter or the comments in YouTube, and do let us know if there's any funny stories of Gazza, because they're always good to.
There's loads. Way too many to mention. If I can recommend one thing, like if you've got a spare hour or two, go and lose yourself in YouTube finding people tell Paul Gascoigne stories. Hilarious stuff out there. I find it really sad and upsetting to see him now, and obviously a few years ago he really did nearly try and lose his life. I think it's quite well documented that he basically did OD. He did try and end it, and it's a shame because he's so well idolized and loved by the majority of people for what he did in a football shirt, and that's where he was at his best. I find it uncomfortable for considering it's someone that I loved genuinely so much to talk about the stuff that happened with his wife, and then not being there for the birth, and not kind of saying to Rangers, do you know what, I need to get out of here and go back to London or whatever. But maybe London would have been the wrong thing for him as well. I don't know. I'd rather remember the football. It's always tinged when I see him talk now, because you can see what he's done to himself. You couldn't understand him at the best of times because of that accent, but now even when he speaks, he could have not had for drink for a year, but he's always kind of slurring. It's damaged him. It's incredibly upsetting.
We touched on it before and after, and even now we're recording. This could be a half an hour podcast, which it is, or it could be a 5-hour podcast. We didn't touch on even the people that were around him, like Jimmy Five Bellies and all of that. It was the influence and the circle that was around him that never really helped. But he was an enigma, and when you do remember the positives, it automatically brings a smile to your face. There's Paul Gascoigne and Gazza, and his nickname is Gazza is immortalised.
Yeah, there's not many English players have claimed a nickname like that.
No.
Wazza and Shrek is not quite the same, is it?
It just isn't.
Gazza.
It just isn't. I don't think I've ever referred to Rooney as Wazza. It just doesn't work. Gazza is the one and only.
There's lots of people who've had Azzas, and if they have, it's because of Gazza.
100% agree with you there. James, should we tell people what other content we have rest of the week? There's only a couple of days left now.
Who knows what day it is? Did you see the idiot in my stream last night who was convinced it was Tuesday? Non-stop. He was in the chat going, why you keep saying Wednesday is Tuesday? Anyway, God, that was fun last night. Nice. Yeah, I'll be streaming tomorrow afternoon, open forum as usual on YouTube. Come and join me, probably about 1 o'clock-ish UK time. Ask anything you like. We'll do the Champman stream again Saturday. And then next week is a big one. In terms of obviously main podcast Monday. I haven't decided on content during the week, but there could be more than normal. And obviously on the Saturday, the 24-hour stream begins at 6 a.m. on Saturday the 23rd. Have we decided what we're raising money for, Suj?
NHS-related charities. So it will be to help the heroes that are helping people with COVID-19. There are a number around at the moment. I've been pitched a few, actually, just like you can go straight to the NHS or COVID Kitchen, who are providing food and meals for NHS workers that are doing like 20-hour shifts and all that kind of stuff. So we'll probably put a couple up there and split it between the two of them. I had a good chat with Manchild, the producer, today, and just, you know, asked him the question, how do we get two mics into a recorder, into a computer, through Zoom with guests and streamed out live on YouTube for 24 hours? And he just looked at me like, what do you want me to try and do? So he's got all his cables. He's trying to plug them all together to figure out how we can live stream and get all the audio and get all the guests.
You're not convincing people, Suj. I'm telling you that I've got FPL captain. For your man-child, I've got FPL captain, and we'll make this work.
The software isn't the issue. We can get the technicals on that. It's actually all the wiring. But we found a solution today, so that's all sorted. We're going to test it out probably on Monday or Tuesday, whenever I'm in the office. And yeah, we're looking good, James. The live stream, 24-hour live stream, is on the cards, so do stay tuned for that. We'll start dropping a few scheduled bits and pieces in the next couple of days.
That's coming in the next few days.
Yeah. So there you go. That's the content. I hope you enjoyed a little run back and look at Gazza's career and life. If you do have any funny stories or links to any videos, do share them on Twitter or in the YouTube comments. Love to have a look. But most importantly, guys, do stay safe and ciao for now.
Be nice to each other. One Paul Gascoigne. Cue music, man, child.